On Wednesday, June 17, 2015, Dylan Roof entered the sanctuary of the 199-year-old Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church and opened fire. 9 black parishioners died, and America reeled from the shock. For black people and the black church, it was a reminder of what the church has withstood and how it remains crucial to the lives of black people. A backward glance helps us see that the church's present stance proves its relevance and authorizes its voice. Almost 200 years after the first enslaved Africans arrived in America, religious groups protested the institution of slavery. The Christianization of blacks became part of a bigger political debate. Newly converted black Christians considered ideas of abolition and fair treatment. Methodist churches, Baptist churches, Presbyterian churches, AME churches, and Episcopal churches began to accept black members. Near the end of the 18th century, the Free African Society was established, and soon thereafter, the Free African Society established its own segregated church. A trend soon followed, and the institution we call the Black Church was born. Blacks, freed and slaves, worshiped within the same walls as white people in Richmond, and the historic location still stands today. In 1821, the first African Church of Manchester was established by free blacks and remained independent of any white congregation and would become known as the First Baptist Church of South Richmond. The power of black churches could not be ignored. Attacks on the fledgling black church prompted a call to action. 1 year before Nat Turner's Christianity-inspired revolt, the National Negro Convention was born, and Lincoln became president. Blacks in his America had gained strength. Their identity rested in their beliefs, and that identity required justice. Lincoln made slavery a Christian and political issue and forged the dual identity of blacks with their church. By 1864, the NNC became the National Equal Rights League and led the campaign for congressional ratification of the 15th Amendment. Black church leaders formed schools, led isolated communities, and rallied the political might of his people. Following the war, theological training in Richmond emerged. The Richmond Theological Institute, which would eventually become the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology at Virginia Union, was established. During the war, black Christians were more commonplace, and one of the most famous was John Jasper, a slave who preached to Confederate soldiers. Eventually, the Reverend Jasper would found 6 Mount Zion Baptist Church in 1867. His classic sermon, "The Sun Don't Move," is one of the most famous sermons of all time. By 1876, the Richmond Theological Institute became the premier college for the advanced training for black clergy in the South and became one of the building blocks of Virginia Union University. In 1887, the Mount Carmel and several other churches were established to meet the needs of the growing African American community. These early ministers were key in defining black culture and life in Richmond. Activities, intellectual and entertaining, came from the church. With the Brown versus Board of Education decision barely 2 years old and politically stalled, countless black churches, mostly Southern black churches, remained under physical attack. The black church would not stand by and wait for resolution. With Dr. Martin Luther King as its fulcrum, the black church showed that the time of violence against it would not be tolerated. A new age in the civil rights movement had arrived. The clergy were in the pulpit, in the streets, and in the classroom. Mount Carmel's very own were gifted theologians who impacted the nation. Dr. Thomas F. Friedman, the church's 6th pastor, while on leave from the Mount Carmel, became the legendary debate coach of Texas Southern University and championed his team to national recognitions for decades, beginning in 1949. The late Rosamond Kay, the church's 7th pastor, was also key in spurring Dr. Martin Luther King to march forward on issues of race and equality. The late Dr. E.D. McCreary, the church's 8th pastor, helped establish SCLC and NAACP chapters, brought the Mount Carmel to the position of prominence in the Richmond area. Since the tenure of Dr. E.D. McCreary, Mount Carmel's pastors have helped to pilot programs, stood against discrimination, and worked to connect to the community. Black churches focus on a broader agenda and community. Missions overseas, food pantries, and even community gardens to battle food deserts in urban communities. They stand against violence with nonviolence and dialogue. America is integrated now because of the knowledge of lawyers and the power of the Black church. The Mount Carmel and its family of churches stand tall and remain reminders of more than 2 centuries of the strength and the resiliency of Black people.